Hello, welcome to the first episode of But Did They Learn? A podcast challenging nurse educators to rethink their approach to nursing curriculum. This is Kelsey, your host. I am nursing faculty at an Oregon-based university, and my passions and research interests lie in critical pedagogy and curriculum revision to streamline students' nursing process. This podcast is meant to be a starting point for nurse educators to engage in discussions around pedagogy and curriculum. So after listening, please engage with other viewers and subscribers in the comments by responding to the prompts found in the episode description. Alright, so without further ado, let's dive into this week's episode. To start the podcast off, I want to talk about the importance of reframing how we as educators think of nursing education. The purpose of this podcast is not so much to look at education on a broad level, such as backwards design, but more to challenge individual educators to reframe their focus in evaluating their pedagogy and curriculum by asking themselves one question: but did they learn? This question may seem obvious, but in my experience, pedagogy, curriculum, and assessments are content-focused, geared towards evaluating for knowledge and implicitly intelligence, not student-focused, where individual ability to apply learning or understanding of content to real-life scenarios is evaluated. Conversation surrounding the shift from content-focused to student-centered pedagogy is not new, but yet Berg and Lepp, 2023, found in a review of the literature, teacher and content-centered pedagogy still prevails in our curriculum. Why is this? In my experience as faculty in an undergraduate nursing program, I've identified three norms that are problematic in our shift from content-centered to student-centered learning. In this episode, I will provide a brief overview of the themes or norms. In the following episodes, so episodes 2 through 4, I will address each in depth. So our first norm is that our learners and teaching practices have changed, but not in the same way. So what do I mean by this? Well, the learners in our classroom, be it virtual or in person, have changed drastically, even just in the past handful of years. There's no denying the impact of COVID-19 on education and learning. And the students in our classrooms are proof of that. In response, educational practices have changed, but these practices are not quite hitting the mark. We ask students to think critically when many don't know how to think in the first place. I don't mean this in a negative manner. I mean the students in our classrooms today largely have not been taught how to think. How to look at a textbook chapter and pick out the most important information. How to apply the knowledge that they've attained to a real-life situation. How to use their own reasoning and judgment processes to interpret data. Instead, in this age where information is readily available, they want a clear-cut checklist of tasks or a standardized set of if-then statements for nursing. In fact, in their chapter in After the Fall, Challenges of Teaching Critical Thinking in Post-Pandemic Undergraduate Psychology, Dunn and Baker discuss how our society's heavy reliance on technology negatively impacts our ability to think. 2025. The learners that are in our classrooms are ones who have increasingly been brought up with a reliance on technology, not just personally, but academically. Instead of researching and appraising various sources prior to reaching a conclusion, all of this information is readily available to students with just a few clicks. Our basics of teaching critical thinking are now too advanced for our learners. If our focus remains on the content, such as the use of case studies and simulation to promote critical thinking, we are not adequately supporting our students to develop critical thinking skills. We must start by teaching our students how to think, how to problem solve on their own, and how to engage prior to teaching them critical thinking processes. Our next norm is content and cognitive overload. Often, due to the sheer amount of content, nursing school is synonymous with rigor. This is an especially hard norm when we consider how our learners have changed. Nursing has long been calling for increased diversity in our workforce, and though we are making strides towards this as a profession, the increasing diversity of our learners is a crucial component for educators to consider when developing equitable pedagogical practices. Our learners are increasingly unable to afford the luxury of prioritizing school over work. In fact, many of our learners work and attend school full-time in addition to other familial and personal obligations. Though they know it is perhaps not recommended, financially they have no other option. When faculty assign, then, over 100 pages of reading across 2 or 3 courses each week, a practice I've seen as faculty and experienced as a student, it is no wonder that our students triage their time and do not fully complete or engage with course texts and readings, as discussed in Stuffle 2025. As faculty, if we know this, why do we keep assigning it? In some ways, I feel this is an age-old issue in nursing education. There's simply too much content to cover. So how do educators choose what to cover? Well, sometimes this is outlined by the curriculum, such as here in Oregon with the Oregon Consortium for Nursing Education, or OCNE curriculum. Other times, it's the program, while yet others, it's left to the educator. Ultimately, the content we teach our students should allow them to achieve competency in the AACN's Nursing Essentials and any others set forth by our State Board of Nursing. Regardless, the amount of content nursing education covers is much larger than the amount of time allotted. In Chapter 9 of their book Curriculum Development in Nursing Education, Iwasiw et al. Discusses how educators can distill content into key concepts by distilling the curriculum through analysis, interpretation, and synthesis. 2020. When we think about centering our teaching practices on our learners, we must center the methods through which we ask them to learn around how they learn. Research shows that our learners today struggle to engage with textbooks. Stuffle 2025. So how can we center our out-of-class work on learners, decrease their cognitive and content load, and support their learning process? Our final norm is closely intertwined with the other two and regards the idea of a fixed mindset in curriculum and pedagogy. Now, mindset is something that both we as educators and students bring to the table, but as educators, we play a critical role in helping students to reframe theirs. Simply defined, students with a growth mindset are oriented to the learning process as one of effort and growth, whereas those with a fixed mindset view success with a can or cannot attitude, defined by Carter et al. 2025. Fixed mindsets are reinforced through dated pedagogical and curriculum practices such as high-stakes testing, antiquated grading skills, and a culture of competent or good versus growth, and in the words of Carol Dweck, the power of yet, 2014. Once, when discussing a student presentation rubric with another nurse educator, I was told point blank that not all students were natural public speakers, and therefore not all students would receive an A on that aspect of the rubric. This situation is just one of many that reflect the fixed mindset that educators can have. Is this equitable? Is it a fair grading practice to create an assignment that you know students do not have the capacity or ability to do well on? What are you grading? Such approaches to assessment reinforce learner trauma and create spaces that do not provide psychological safety to our students. Thiel and Najjar, 2025. When we ask ourselves, but did they learn? It must not only be the outcome of the assignment, but the intent. Our intent should be for them to learn, to grow, and ultimately to demonstrate an ability to meet our nursing competencies. There you have it, the 3 norms I've encountered that promote content or teacher-focused education over student-centered. Asking ourselves, but did they learn? Is key to challenging many of these norms in academia and the theme of this podcast. And while full-scale revision of nursing curricula may seem like an insurmountable task, it's my hope that through the next 3 episodes and this podcast, each of us as educators can begin to make strides towards placing students at the center of our pedagogy. This is Kelsey, your But Did They Learn host. Thank you for tuning in to episode 1, But Did They Learn? The Importance of Challenging the Norm in Nursing Education. Please join the conversation by responding to the prompts below in the comments. I look forward to engaging with you, and please tune in next week for episode 2, I Think I Can, Going Back to Basics.